Some people don't leave your life in a way that makes noise. They don't argue. They don't explain themselves in long messages. They don't announce that they are done. They fade. The replies take longer. The conversations feel thinner. The warmth changes before the words do. Then one day, there is nothing. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence where connection used to be. And what hurts the most is not the distance itself. It's the confusion. The unanswered question that keeps returning. Why didn't they tell me? We are taught to believe that leaving should be clear. That people owe us explanations. That silence is immature or cruel. So when someone cuts ties without explaining, it feels wrong. It feels unfinished. It feels unfair. But psychology often lives in the places we don't like to look. Because silence is rarely the beginning. It is usually the end of a very long internal process. People who leave quietly often stayed loudly inside themselves for years. They argued internally. They negotiated. They hoped. They told themselves, maybe it will change. Maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I just need to try harder. And for a long time, they do. From the outside, it looks normal. Nothing dramatic is happening. No obvious conflict. But inside, something is slowly wearing down. Small disappointments accumulate. Unmet needs pile up quietly. Boundaries are crossed in ways that seem minor, but repeat. Nothing feels big enough to justify leaving. So they stay. They stay because they care. They stay because leaving feels extreme. They stay because they don't want to be the person who gives up. Until one day, staying costs more than leaving. This is the part most people never see. By the time someone goes silent, they are often already exhausted. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just tired in a deep, settled way. Tired of explaining how they feel. Tired of hoping conversations will land differently. Tired of feeling unseen in the same way, over and over again. Silence is not chosen first. It is chosen last. Before someone stops explaining, they usually explain a lot. They try to be gentle. They soften their words. They choose timing carefully. They say things like, I don't feel heard. That hurt me. I need something different. Sometimes they say it directly. Sometimes they hint. Sometimes they downplay their pain so it won't cause tension. They adjust themselves instead. They speak less. They ask for less. They expect less. Not because they don't need more, but because needing more hasn't worked. Over time, a pattern forms. They explain how something feels. The other person dismisses it, minimizes it, defends themselves instead of listening. So the person explains again. More clearly this time. More honestly. And again, nothing changes. This is where something subtle but important happens. Explaining begins to feel unsafe. Not physically unsafe. Emotionally unsafe. Because every explanation becomes a debate. Every feeling becomes something to justify. Every boundary becomes a negotiation. They start to notice the cost. The tight chest before conversations. The rehearsed sentences. The anxiety that appears before contact. The body begins reacting before the mind catches up. The body remembers what the mind keeps hoping will be different. Eventually, the realization forms quietly. Talking doesn't lead to understanding here. It only leads to more exhaustion. And when someone reaches that conclusion, silence stops being avoidance. It becomes self-protection. Long before someone decides to leave, their body starts preparing them. They tense when a message comes in. They feel drained after interactions that used to feel neutral. They need time to recover from conversations. They begin to dread contact without knowing why. Nothing dramatic is happening. But nothing feels right either. This is often when people judge themselves the hardest. They tell themselves they're too sensitive, too dramatic, too demanding. So they push through. They show up anyway. They keep trying to be reasonable. They keep explaining. Until one quiet thought changes everything. If I stay, I will lose myself. Not all at once. But slowly. In confidence. In energy. In self-trust. They notice they're shrinking to maintain peace. They're editing themselves. They're choosing silence inside the relationship just to survive it. And that's when leaving becomes clear. Not as a dramatic decision, but as a necessary one. Leaving doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels heavy, sad, lonely, but it also feels honest. Silence becomes the only boundary that finally works. People often ask, why didn't they just explain one last time? But for someone who has already explained themselves repeatedly, a final explanation doesn't feel healing. It feels dangerous. Because explaining again means reopening everything. Reliving it. Defending feelings that were already dismissed. It means hoping, again, that this time will be different. And hope is expensive when you're already depleted. So they don't explain. Not to punish. Not to control. But because they cannot afford another emotional negotiation. They leave quietly because noise has never protected them. After leaving, there is grief. Real grief. They miss what could have been. They miss the version of the relationship they hoped for. They question themselves late at night. Peace comes, but it is mixed with sadness. Leaving wasn't easy. It was necessary. For the people left behind, the silence can feel brutal. Without explanations, the mind fills the gap. Often with self-blame. Sometimes with anger. But silence is not always rejection. Sometimes it is the result of too many words that went nowhere. People who cut ties without explaining are often people who tried for a long time. They stayed longer than they should have. They hoped longer than was healthy. Leaving quietly is not cruelty. It is capacity. It is choosing peace when understanding isn't possible. It is choosing survival over being right. Distance is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is clarity. And silence is not always the absence of care. Sometimes it is the last form of self-respect someone has left. There is a moment that comes after the silence has settled. Not immediately. Not in the shock phase. Not when you are still refreshing messages or replaying conversations. It comes later. When the quiet becomes permanent. This is the part few people talk about. The part where there is no more guessing left to do. Only acceptance, or resistance to it. Because when someone cuts ties without explaining, they don't just leave a relationship behind. They leave a gap. And the mind does not like gaps. The mind wants stories. It wants reasons. It wants closure shaped like logic. So it creates narratives. You replay your last interactions. You zoom in on small moments. A tone shift. A delayed reply. A sentence that felt off. You wonder if there was one mistake. One comment. One moment that caused everything. But endings like this are rarely caused by one thing. They are caused by accumulation. And the hardest part to accept is that you may never know which moment mattered most. This is where pain changes shape. At first, the pain is sharp, confusing, restless. Later, it becomes quieter, heavier, more reflective. You stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, how do I live with not knowing? This is the grief of unanswered endings. And it is real grief. Because what was lost was not just the person. It was the chance to understand the ending together. You didn't get a final conversation. You didn't get clarity. You didn't get the dignity of mutual understanding. You were left to process it alone. And that can feel deeply unfair. People often underestimate how painful ambiguity is. The human nervous system craves resolution. We want a beginning, a middle, and an end that makes sense. Silence denies that structure. It forces you to sit with uncertainty. And uncertainty is where the mind turns inward. Sometimes harshly. You may start blaming yourself, questioning your worth, rewriting your identity around the loss. You ask yourself if you were too much, or not enough, too demanding, too distant. You imagine alternative versions of yourself, versions that might have made them stay. This is where compassion matters most, because the absence of an explanation does not mean the explanation was simple. It often means it was complex, emotional, and unresolved even for the person who left. Not all silence is calculated. Some silence is overwhelmed. Some people leave because they cannot articulate what they feel without collapsing under it. Some leave because explaining would require confronting pain they are not ready to face. Some leave because words have already failed them too many times. Understanding this does not erase the hurt, but it can soften the edge. There is another truth that emerges slowly. Sometimes, the lack of explanation is the explanation. Not in a cruel way, but in an honest one. It tells you that communication between you and this person had reached a limit. That mutual understanding was no longer possible in the way you needed it to be. And that matters. Because relationships are not only built on intention. They are built on capacity. The capacity to listen, to reflect, to change. When that capacity runs out on either side, silence becomes the outcome. Living with that reality takes time. You will have days where you feel strong, grounded, at peace, and days where the absence feels loud again. This back and forth does not mean you are failing to heal. It means you are human. Healing from an unexplained ending is not about forgetting. It is about integrating. It is about learning how to hold the memory, without needing it to resolve perfectly. You begin to notice subtle shifts. You stop checking for messages. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You stop hoping for an explanation that may never come. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started choosing yourself. This is where growth quietly begins. You learn to trust your own perception again, to believe that your experience was real, even without external validation. To accept that someone leaving silently does not erase what you felt. You begin to understand something important. Closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes it is something you build. From reflection, from boundaries, from self-honesty. You may never know exactly why they left, but you can know how it affected you, what it taught you, what you will no longer tolerate. This kind of ending sharpens discernment. You become more aware of emotional availability, more sensitive to patterns of dismissal, more protective of your energy, not hardened, just clearer. And clarity is not bitterness. It is self-respect that has been earned. Over time, the silence stops feeling like rejection. It starts feeling like information. Information about limits, about misalignment, about what could not continue without harming one or both of you. And that reframing matters, because it shifts the story from, "I wasn't enough," to, "This could not hold us both." There is also a quiet strength that grows in surviving an ending without explanation. You learn how to regulate yourself without answers, how to sit with unresolved emotion, how to move forward without rewriting the past. This builds emotional maturity in a way few experiences do. You stop chasing people who disappear. You stop over-explaining yourself to be understood. You start choosing relationships where communication does not feel like labor. And one day, often unexpectedly, you notice something. The silence no longer defines the story. It becomes one chapter, not the conclusion. You remember the connection without idealizing it. You acknowledge the pain without drowning in it. You hold both truth and grief without needing one to erase the other. That is integration. That is healing. And it does not require their explanation. It requires your permission to move on without it. At some point, something shifts. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. You realize the silence no longer controls your emotional weather. It's still there, but it no longer defines you. This is when the ending finally changes shape. Because for a long time, silence feels like something done to you. Something imposed. Something unfair. But eventually, if you allow yourself to sit with it long enough, it becomes something you can look at without flinching. Not because it stopped hurting, but because it stopped owning you. This is the part no one prepares you for. The part where the unanswered ending stops asking questions and starts offering insight. You begin to see the relationship more clearly, not through longing, but through honesty. You notice the moments you kept explaining yourself, the ways you softened your needs, the times you waited for change that never came. You stop romanticizing the connection. You stop replaying only the good parts. And you finally allow the full picture to exist. Not as an accusation, but as truth. You understand that silence didn't arrive out of nowhere. It arrived because something between you could no longer be repaired. Without cost. And that cost would have been you. This is where self-trust quietly returns. You begin to believe your own experience again. You stop needing someone else to confirm what you felt. You remember how your body reacted, how your energy changed, how relief came alongside the grief. Those details matter. They tell a story your mind once tried to ignore. A story about limits, about capacity, about what happens when connection turns into strain. Slowly, you stop asking why they couldn't stay, and start asking why you stayed as long as you did. Not with shame, but with compassion. You stayed because you cared, because you hoped, because you believed effort would be enough. That does not make you weak. It makes you human. And when you finally let go of the need for their explanation, you gain something else. Discernment. You become more attuned to emotional safety. You notice when communication feels one-sided. You recognize when closeness requires self-erasure. You stop chasing people who disappear when things get real. You stop shrinking to keep peace. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy, or silence with depth. This doesn't harden you. It clarifies you. You still care. You still feel deeply. But you choose differently now. You choose relationships where words don't have to be defended, where boundaries don't require distance to be respected, where silence is shared, not imposed. The unexplained ending becomes a teacher, not a scar you hide, but a lesson you carry quietly. You understand that not every ending is meant to be resolved together. Some endings are meant to be integrated alone. And that realization is powerful, because it frees you from waiting. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for insight. Waiting for a message that may never come. You stop living in suspension. You step back into your life fully. And one day, often when you least expect it, you realize something else. The silence no longer feels personal. It feels contextual. It reflects where the relationship reached its limit, not where your worth ended. That distinction changes everything. You stop seeing the ending as proof of inadequacy, and start seeing it as evidence of incompatibility. Not everyone can meet you where you are. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to grow with you. That does not make them bad. And it does not make you unlovable. It simply means the relationship could not hold both truths at once. This is where peace settles. Not the kind that erases memory, but the kind that allows memory to exist without pain running the show. You remember without reopening wounds. You reflect without spiraling. You move forward without needing to rewrite the past. And perhaps the most important shift happens here. You forgive, not necessarily the person, but the situation. You forgive yourself for not knowing sooner, for hoping longer than you should have, for believing words would eventually lead to change. You forgive the version of you that tried, because that version did the best they could, with the information they had. And then, quietly, you let the story end. Not with answers, but with understanding. Not with closure given, but with closure chosen. The silence no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like an ending that made space. Space for clarity. Space for healthier connection. Space for yourself. And that is the part rarely acknowledged. Sometimes the people who leave without explaining are not the ones who take something from us. They are the ones who reveal what we can no longer give away.